Ask the Podcast Coach for June 1st. June, are you crazy? June 1st, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from HomeGadgetGeeks.com. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Happy 1st of June. I don't think that's a holiday or anything, but it's always good to be on Ask the Podcast Coach.
Yeah, the other fun thing was apparently my latest credit card expires at the end of this month, and I woke up to 8 million emails of companies going, you need to update your credit card before it expires. And I was like, well, I guess that's a good thing. So, because that's always a bummer when, all the stuff you pay for, you no longer have access to it. Yeah.
Stops working.
So if I had a subscription to coffee, I would definitely want to update my credit card.
Yeah, because you definitely would.
You can't survive without.
No, and you can't have subscriptions to coffee these days. That's the crazy thing.
You can have a subscription.
Let's pour this.
Yes.
Let's pour this thing.
And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you want to look good, there's really just one place to go, and that is podcastbranding.co. You're looking at the screen, you're seeing Ask the Podcast Coach, School of Podcasting, and Podcast Rodeo Show. But wait, there's more. That's right. Your podcast website and the new podcast hot seat, which is now up at podcasthotseat.com, are all done by Mark. And if you're thinking, hey, I bet Dave didn't have to pay for any of those. No, I paid for every single one. I don't know if I paid for the School of Podcasting. That was the first one he did, but I think I did. But keep in mind that I hire Mark because he's good. Like, I don't have to fiddle around. And every time I look at my logo or upload it someplace, I'm like, man, I'm so glad this guy just makes great looking artwork. So he's so different than somebody on, say, Fiverr, because number one, he's an award-winning podcaster, and he's got the marketing brain. Tell him about your show, and he'll come up with something that fits your show. And I'm not done, so forget the cappuccino lady. I'm not done talking about my buddy Mark. And plus, I have more slides today, so I was playing with this.
Is that a lady?
No, that's a dude.
Okay. All right.
But anyway, yeah, so go over to podcastbranding.co, because remember, they're going to see you before they hear you. So with that, we do have another fun, this is the Mugshot, if I remember right. In fact, let me get you over to Jim.
Look at that. Yeah, look at that. Big thanks to my good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on a true story, based on a true story podcast.com, also sponsored this nice mug. And if you head over there, Midway is the movie they're looking at, and latest in the podcast, the 2019 version. If you're into the war movies, World War II movies, that was a very interesting take on the Battle of Midway, and the cinematography and the CGI is amazing in that movie. I watch clips of it on YouTube all the time. But check it out. Based on truestorypodcast.com, they're talking about Midway. Dan, as always, thank you for your sponsorship.
Yeah, I love his two truths and a lie thing that he does at the beginning of his show.
Yeah.
And I love that he had a guy on talking about Napoleon. And they're like, so how accurate was the movie? And the guy went, D minus, like D, maybe something like that. It wasn't apparently a little. Well, the problem is you're trying to, anytime you have any subject of anything and you have a ton to cover and you decide, okay, we're going to cover this in 90 minutes when we really need maybe 2 hours and 10.
Yeah,
it gets a little crazy. So you got to cut
somebody's
stuff.
Life in 90 minutes is a little hard, especially for a guy like Napoleon, right?
Yeah.
As famous as he was, there's a really interesting clip in there where he's up on a hill and they're hiding and the enemy comes in and they start shooting and they move him over. The lake is frozen. And so they basically chase them out onto the lake and then just bomb the lake and everybody falls. Everybody falls
Nice.
in. The cinematography on that one is also incredible. Like that, it's just really, really well done. So on that movie too, the newest Napoleon, whether you agree with it or it's accurate or not, it's actually a really spectacular. I think some of the cinematography was done really, really well.
Nice. Well, Jim, I was doing some consulting this week, and I thought, you being a person that works with coaches, I'm like, this would be a fun way to open it up, because if you've never read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's worth a read. It's by Stephen Covey. And I know they just came out with some sort of like 30-year edition or 40 or something. It's been around forever. And
been a while. I read that when I was young.
Yeah, I read it when I was, I think, 20. I just remember like, oh, this is gold. But number 2 is start with the end in mind, because I was doing some coaching this week, and I'm not throwing people under the bus, but it was just one of the things I love about this show, about hanging out in Facebook groups is, Jim, how long have you been doing this? You've been doing this over a decade, right?
Oh, yeah. 12, 13. Yeah. I think Home Gadget Geeks is 13 years old.
Yeah. So I love seeing when I see somebody who's brand new, and I'm like, oh man, it's been a long time since I was this person. And so this person jumped in, and it was just like, wait a minute, they hadn't answered a lot of questions. So if I'm a coach and I want people to hire me as a coach and I want to do a podcast, the number 2 habit is start with the end in mind. So that's the end. I want to be hired as a coach. So what do I need to do that? Just the basics, right? What would you suggest?
Well, I get this question all the time in my space. What do I do? And I say, well, this is like any small business that you start. It's like, if you opened a hot dog stand, okay, where's the location? Is there a need for it? What are you good at? And this is from a strengths-based perspective. Like, what are you good at and what are you not good at? And what you're good at, you should do. And what you're not good at, you should get some help with. Hire it. Find somebody, some of those kinds of things. Anyway, so we're constantly thinking, I always kind of think through, I think some folks in that realm think it just happens, and it's like any job. You got to kind of work it like a small business, Well, got some capital.
Well, one thing was I asked him, and I'm like, so, because he also had a book. He's like, well, it's not really so much about selling the book as hiring me as a coach. And I go, great. And I go, do you have a website? And he said, no. And then later it turned out he has a domain that he pointed at a landing page. I'm like, okay, good. You have a domain. That's good to go. But then it was like, do you have any kind of like scheduling tool? I go, I use TidyCal. I go, I for a while there, I wasn't recommending it, but they fixed all their bugs. It's a one-time fee of $39. And I go, because you're going to need a way for people to schedule you and to have them pay for it. And he was like, oh, and he hadn't really thought about that. And I was like, okay, well, that's something you're going to need, whatever, if it's Acuity scheduling or Calendly. I'm like, you're going to need a way for people to schedule your time and for a way to pay for it. And he had something where he could accept payments. It might have been PayPal or something like that. And I'm like, but, there's going to be that. And I go, now, do you actually have like a website? He said, nope, just a domain that points at a landing page. I go, well, if you're going to do a podcast, I go, you kind of need a website. And I go, in fact, Tim said earlier, he said, hey, I've been binging my new show, Your Podcast Website. And I go, you kind of need one of these because, if you tell people how to hire you, it can't be, oh, hold on, let's get on a phone call or whatever. I go, your website works 24/7. So I'd explain to him that I think it's a great idea to put the episodes on there. Things like that. So is there anything you see people kind of getting stuck on, or they skip, or they go, oh, I totally forgot about that?
I think finding the need in the marketplace and then gravitating towards it. I think sometimes, listen, we talk about finding our passion and doing, and working and those things we love the most, but there's got to be opportunity in some of these things. And I find individuals who find a need, things people actually need or need help with.
That's it.
Need work. Think of Gordon, right? How in the space and in our bubble, and I don't know what's like outside our bubble because I'm not there, but in our bubble, when people think of the legal stuff, they go, oh, it's Gordon. He filled a need.
Yeah.
He was right in one of those like, oh yeah, this legal stuff is hard. I need to be there to help people to do that. And I think sometimes we don't. We try to solve problems that don't exist. And you're like, nobody really needs that.
Well,
to be honest, right?
I watched that. There was a WeWork, kind of not so much a documentary, although I'm sure there's documentaries on them, but it was kind of a Netflix series, kind of like how it came about and how this guy was a little bit on the crazy side and doing all sorts of stuff. And somewhere in there, somebody said, yeah, but WeWork is a solution to a problem that nobody's really identified yet. Everybody, I get it that I guess if you want to hang out with other people while you work, but that's anytime I say, if you want to monetize your show, if that's the goal, you got to solve a problem. Even if it's like premium content, well, that premium content should solve a problem. Now, the problem might be I've had a long day at work and I want to laugh. All right. So it doesn't always have to be how-to stuff, but it's one of those things that you kind of, if that's the goal, you have to somehow solve a problem. Yeah. Coach Dave is going crazy in the chat room here. He says, for businesses, it's a two-parter. I generally accepted that the product service is only what sits above the waterline. You need to do the following: a mission, cash flow, resource management, marketing and communications, operation, legal, compliance, product service, a team, and a leadership of 8 elements. So yeah, it's one of those things where, especially as you get bigger and bigger, but I just, like, we never even talked about microphones or, what he was going to do. It was all like he had just kind of jumped in. I want to do a podcast. He's kind of a dating / I guess life coach. That's such a wide thing, and he'd been doing it a while, so he had experience and stuff. And I just explained to him. I go, well, we just talked about things like, well, how are you going to end your show? Because he was like, well, how do I start my show? And I go, well, here's a template. You don't have to stick to this, but it's a great place to start. Welcome to the blah blah show, where we blank so you can blank. And I go, you can even add in there, welcome to the blah blah show, where people like this, trying to do this, we help them do this, so blank, So if it's welcome to the Fat 50 and Frisky show, where we help men in their 50s regain their, youthful appearance and, et cetera, exactly. So it was just interesting because he and on one hand, kudos to this person for just saying, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. I really don't know what I'm doing, which is why he got some coaching. But it was just, in a way, kind of fun. Like, okay, I got into this. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I was like, oh, and I'm like, well, hold on. And we did the whole, why are you doing it? Who's it for? When they overlap, that's your what kind of thing. But I just thought it was fun that he had just jumped in. I was like, well, again, you have to know, how am I going to measure the success of this? It's not always downloads. And in his case, he wanted people to hire him. And I'm like, okay, well, we got to have a way for people to hire you and things like that. So, but that was, it's always fun starting at the very beginning and going, oh, I remember this. When you go, oh, I didn't realize that, if, like, I've had people at Libsyn where they don't realize if they quit paying Libsyn, a place that hosts your files, and if you don't pay us, we're not going to host your files. And then your podcast goes dead and you get removed from all the apps and things like that. And like, you didn't really think that went through. So
in our space, in our coaching space, we identify coaching and consulting as two different activities too. And not that it matters. Like, again, it goes back to some, there's a little bit of wordsmithing in this, but I think sometimes we mistake coaching for consulting or vice versa.
Yeah. What's the difference?
Lots of times coaching is a lot about asking questions and guiding someone to through their own journey to kind of answer their own questions, but to work with them to pull out and help them with lots of introspection and lots of questions, right? Not a lot of answers. In our world, the coach is more about questions and listening, and then they are about answers. Oftentimes, though, we see sometimes on the consulting side is giving answers, like, what microphone should I use?
Right.
The answer is consulting. That's a consulting answer. I think you should use this one and avoid these, right? And again, I don't think in a lot of cases it matters what we call it, or even if we know we're doing one or the other. In my world, we spend a lot of time talking about the difference between the two. But in a lot of cases, I'm not sure it really, and maybe even in that world, I don't know if saying, "Oh no, you're not a coach, you're a consultant," or the other way
Right.
around. I don't know if that matters, but there is some differentiation between thinking, when you think about a sports coach, they're telling their players what to do, right? There's no
Right.
question. I don't know. What play do you think we should have run that, or right? It's the on the performance side of things or in the sporting side of things that takes, but definitely in the business world today, in the business environment, we're seeing more coaching being more of a guiding exercise and consulting being a more telling exercise. And I think if you're going to do this, if you're going to be in this space, and maybe this is what I'm getting to, a good question to ask someone is, as you start the engagement, are you looking for me to tell you what to do? Or are you looking for me to help guide you through the process? Right. And so that may be a good question to start with, because some individuals are saying, you know what, I'm just paying you to just tell me what to do. Don't ask me questions. That's why I hired you. Well, they hired a consultant in that case, right? Some folks just want to, and I think, as we think about Mark, as he's working through your logo stuff, he's asking you questions, right? He's like, what do you think about that? And what about this? And what are you trying to do with this? And what are you trying to do with that? So I don't know what that long diatribe was all for, but those are
that's helpful though.
Coaching and consulting.
Because I've had people that have hired me to be a coach, and they're like, just tell me what to do. Like, I'm going to do interviews. They're going to be online. What's the best mic? What's the best service? Blah, blah, blah. Just tell me what to do. Now, here's another fun question here that the chat room has brought up. And that is, Jeff says, so what about community? Do you start a podcast around a community and create a podcast? Or wait, do you start a podcast around a community, or do you create a podcast to then start a community? And Todd the Gator says, hey, that's what I did for his Guardian Downcast. He says, I was part of a community and it made it bigger. So, and I'm sitting here thinking I'm clicking these on the screen, and instead I'm unstarring them, which doesn't do a thing. It's well done.
You want some consulting around that?
Yeah, that's it. Yes, but basically, Coach Dave says it depends. On top for seasoning, he says perspective matters. One may start with a community. He says, I built my youth sports show after I had a large and local state-wide community. But I know, ask Ralph, he's often in the chat room, he just started a community, and he's already got like 100 people in it. So I think it's a depends, because if you're on episode 2 and you're getting, 27 downloads an episode, when you start a community and there's just nothing there but tumbleweeds, that could be a little tough. But on the other hand, you could smother the people that show up and say, what did you think of that? And go from there. But boy, that's a good, I know at some point it's a great idea to have a community. My community is in a couple different places. I have the School of Podcasting one. I use my newsletter as a community, where I'll be like, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Or what are you struggling with, or things like that. So it's kind of tricky, but I think a community, I just interviewed Mark Lawley from the Practical Prepping Show, and he's got since January, he's 14,000 people in this community. And so now he's got some people that are moderators. He basically has the rules, like don't do this, we don't talk politics, don't call names. And if he has a 1-strike rule, you break the rule, you're out. That's it. We got 13,999 other people in here. Just don't be an idiot. And so I think a community can help, but it is one of those things where, much like a Patreon or some sort of crowdfunding, you can't just set it up and go, hey, we have a Facebook group. We set up something on Heartbeat. You've got to kind of prime the pump and get people talking to each other. I interviewed a guy, I'll put a link in the show notes, on the School of Podcasting. A great strategy for communities is, if somebody asks you a question, say, oh, that's a great question. Could you do me a favor? Can you put that in the community? And then let them ask it, and then you answer it there for everyone to see, and then people can chime in and kind of go in on that. And then what happens is I've seen this happen where if you start to do that, you'll say, hey, can you put this question in the community? Well, the third time they ask that, they just put the question in the community. And then before you even know it's there, the community started to answer the question before you even know about it. And at that point, that's really what you want to do. Jeff says, hey, how do I get on that newsletter? If you go to, there's two ways. There's podcastingobservations.com, because that's the name of the newsletter. Or if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/newsletter, the podcastingobservations.com is I believe that's still working. Let me know if it's not. It might be one of those weird things where I am horrible at domains where I know it's a thing where you redirect the thing of the IP DNS thing, but most of my domains you have to put www in, which I know makes me sound like I'm 4,000 years old, but I know some domains you don't have to. It'll just go there. Most of mine you do. So I need to take a domain class on what little extra step I have to do to do that, because I think that might be one where you have to go to. You can try podcastingobservations.com. That's my Substack newsletter, which I'll be putting out later today. And then if that doesn't work, go to www.podcastingobservations. Or you can go to schoolofpodcasting.com/newsletter, where you can have your choice. You have my daily podcast tips, which will give you right now about 90 days of daily stuff. And then there's one at the bottom that'll get you to podcasting observations. So Todd the Gator, he says, community is awesome. I can get ideas for shows, make great relationships, collaborate with other podcasts in the niche. And I just had a live show last night talking with my Discord. Yeah, I know Mark with his practical prepping, and I'm sure Ralph is doing this with his AskRalphPodcast.com. You can also then get feedback on an episode. And so what Mark was saying is he has people, because it's a Facebook group, that are typing and prepping or whatever, and they're finding his group. And then somebody will say, that was a really good episode. And then the people that have no idea what they're talking about are like, what are you talking about? Where's the podcast? So it is leading more people to his thing. There we go. I knew Randy would know. Randy's he's a big IT guy. Dave needs CNAME records to redirect www to the @ symbol on the domain. I knew it was something simple.
Your domain, that'll be in your domain registrar site. Yeah.
So, and then Coach Dave says, yeah, what Dave said. I knew it was something stupid. It was just like something I haven't done yet. So that's always fun.
It's generally set up for you. That's kind of, I think, like I use Hover, and I think they do that automatically. So
you would think. Yeah. I know anytime I do stuff with domains, like I was playing with, speaking of newsletters, MailerLite, because I had a member of the School of Podcasting, because I recommend either MailerLite or ConvertKit. And MailerLite, here's the good news, they're really, really, really focused on making sure your email gets delivered. And so you have to do the hokey pokey with the CNAME in your domain thing. And they even had a video like, here's how to do it in GoDaddy. And GoDaddy went to the Descript school of interfaces, meaning that every time I log into GoDaddy, it's a little different. And so as you might imagine, their GoDaddy video instructional thing on here's how you can set up GoDaddy to put the stuff we need in at MailerLite to verify that you're you and that whole 9 yards. And that was out of date. And that's when he went, ugh. And so I said, here, ConvertKit has a free version as well. You can try this. And ConvertKit has a bit of a learning curve. They do some really cool stuff. But that was one where I was like, there are times when I really hate domains, because that was another one where the School of Podcasting, I'm using, I believe it's just hey.com to handle my email. And I think in the process of setting that up, I now don't have all the controls in GoDaddy again. Domains, that's my Achilles heel. That's something when we get, deeper than 3 inches in domains, I'm like, okay, hold on. I got to go to tech support or something like that. Speaking of Ralph.
I threw in the direct link, right, to your Substack.
Yeah.
Jackson.substack.com. Is that they can register there too, right? That's just a redirect for that. So I threw that in chat if you want to get signed up for Dave's newsletter.
Yeah, and all the newsletter is, it's it's like the last one, I think I went crazy. I had 3 paragraphs about, hey, I always talk about laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. And I was talking about how I was watching Young Sheldon. Well, Young Sheldon is based in the 80s slash maybe, pretty much 80s.
80s.
And he's watching these really old video games and the fact that people are talking on a phone on a wall and all this other, they're listening to Walkmans. And I go, this show makes me really feel things. And I said, so maybe that's another thing we should look at. Laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, entertain, but also how are we making people feel? And so that took me 3 paragraphs to do that. And then it's just, here's all the episodes I've did since last time. Here's what caught my eye. And here's what's coming in the future. And I've had people, when I put it out, I was like, this is not a newsletter. This is a paragraph and a half. And I've had people say, I really like your newsletter because I can read it in about 3 minutes. And I'm like, okay. And then when I checked my stats last month on some of my stuff, 30% of my traffic is coming from my newsletter. Like some of my more obscure stuff, like podcastconsultant.com and things like that. I was driving people to that. And then Jim was gone. Okay. So let me see if, he's just gone. I went to put him back and he's not here. Well, that's always fun. But yeah, so I was just using that. And that's what I've been doing with the newsletter. It doesn't have to be a War and Peace. But what I love about it is it's another place where you can ask people without putting out a podcast that, hey, what do you think of this idea? And so I got some great ideas from Ralph from AskRalphPodcast.com about the new podcast hot seat, but I threw some of those ideas by my newsletter. And so it's just a fun way. And he's back. Okay. So let's, we'll hop in.
I just didn't agree with what you were saying. So.
Peace out. I'm out of here, man. Forget you. Yeah. So that's what I use the newsletter for. So any kind of community, anything you can do to, have a better interaction with your audience is always a good thing.
I have 1,000 of those, that community. They're not all in my community, but at work, 1,000 are showing up this weekend to be a part of this conference that I'm doing for work. And community can be challenging too. Like, if you build it, they will complain. So, you're going to get a lot of that. It's such a good and a bad thing all at the same time. I mean, there's moments I really struggle with it. You're thinking, oh, they can answer each other's questions. Yes, but sometimes wrong. They'll fight with each other. Right. And now I don't get too much of that, but I've seen that kind of happen before where they start going back and forth, and that can be damaging to the community. They can divide the community. They can turn on you. Yeah. You get those personalities that get in there, and then you're like, hey, wait a minute. This is, I made this thing, and a personality who wants to be bigger than you comes in and disrupts it, tries to take it over, tries to do something to affect your relationship with the community, whatever. And the bigger it gets, the harder it is. I think sometimes we think, oh, if I could just grow it, this would be so great. Well, the more people you have, the more accountability is out there, and people will absolutely call you out. This is the thing. And this, Dave, you've gotten feedback on things, that you've said or you've posted to your site, and somebody's like, how dare you? Or why can't you spell this correctly? Right. And you'd think some of your best listeners, some of the best folks that are the closest to you, are the ones who just flat out call you out publicly in these groups. And you're like, dude, just send me an email. Like, we could handle this behind the scenes, and you don't have to be such a jerk about it, right? I don't think they think they're being a jerk. I think, honestly, and I think I've said this before here, but I'll say it again. I think we are still trying to figure out socially how to handle social as humans. I think it's a fairly new technology, and many of us are not good at it. And I still think we've got, as a culture, as humans, we've got some work to do to come up with some global standards, some global assumptions, some global politeness, things that you do and you don't do. And I think there's some folks, listen, there's absolutely folks who know what they're doing and they know why they're doing it and they do it on purpose and they do it to dig, right? But I think there's others who are putting things in there who are being offensive, but they don't know they're being offensive, or they're being demeaning and they don't know they're being. They think they're just answering a question, or they think they're just doing something. And then of course, text creates, that it's negative by default. We all read. I don't know why with the text, but when we read text, we think people are yelling at us, or it's always negative, right? So you immediately come back defensive, and that leads this toilet bowl of conversation that goes down. So I think we've got to. I still think it's not going away. Some with public discord, some people are like, oh wait, social has changed culture. Yes, it has. It absolutely has. It's not going away. We've got to figure out as the human race, we need to figure out how to deal with each other in that space and be better. I know one thing: we can control ourselves, and so be a good example out there. Right, be a good example. We have a great. Listen, physician, heal thyself. I have snapped back at people super fast. I got a message from them, and they didn't intend to. It wasn't intended to be a bad thing. I took it, and in a fight or flight moment, I snapped back at them. Right, I'm speaking from experience. I may be the worst at this. I need to take a deep breath, but those are things I think we need to learn. We're going to need to learn to do that better. It's not going away. So we're going to have to learn how to do this area of public discourse. We're going to have to figure out a discourse. We're going to figure out a better way to do it.
Yeah. Jody Krangle says bulletin boards actually changed the culture, which is true. If we go back in the day, man, I forget the thing I was using for bulletin boards back in the day, but Jeff says the live show on Friday mornings. The only thing I hate about Jeff's show on Friday is I do lunch with Dave at 12:30, so I don't get to watch the whole thing. But he says it's been a great community for him. It's a great group of people, and I try to watch that. Here's the thing: if you have a problem child in your group, if you don't want to kick them out, sometimes making the person who's the disruptor an admin can be helpful. Jody says I had a huge community of songwriters on a message board, and they mostly regulated themselves. That's good, because that's a pain in the butt when they're arguing.
Well, if we think the internet was the very first time this happened, let's just be really, really clear. The newspapers during the Revolutionary period, Ben Franklin trolled people in the newspapers, with his editorials, and so the passive aggressive, the snarky, the trolling. That's not unique to the internet. Like that was happening 200 and 300 years ago in newspapers. If you go back and read some of those papers. So don't think that's a new invention. It just got easier to do it before. And I don't know, even in the 80s, 70s and 80s, the letters to the editor in the paper.
Oh yeah.
Go back and read some super hardcore trolling going on there. So don't listen, Xers and boomers, you didn't invent trolling. Okay, you didn't invent it. It's going on long before this. Don't be proud of yourself for that. It's been going on for a long time. We still have to figure out how to handle it.
When I spoke at the Irma Bombeck writing conference, and realize how she stood up for women's rights back in the 70s, and you had all these letters to the editor, just like, why are you letting this woman do this stuff? I was like, holy cow. Coach
Crazy.
Dave, Coach Dave says, I had an audio account with Soundwise, private feed essentially. He says I put my content there for my staff, for example, but I would never put it out in public. It's just his personal thought. So that's a way you can do a community. Todd the Gator said, I have a separate chat channel for just feedback from the podcast. It can really fill the tank. Yep. And get the immediate responses from listeners. Yeah. Getting those responses, that's really, it does put gas in the tank.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does.
Depending on what it is. Yeah. Sometimes it'll empty the tank. He says you have many personalities and sensibilities, and it can be a very fragile thing. And he says, I'm sorry. I just get hyped up when you guys start talking community. So for sure. It's when you get a good one, it's amazing. That's the cool. For me, I like yesterday was lunch with Dave, and I look forward to that. And we talked a little bit about outsourcing your stuff, but a big chunk of that was just, 6, 7 people just hanging out, talking about what's up with you. And it's nice to be around other people that are doing the same thing you do so you don't feel like a weirdo, that whole 9 yards. Anthony has a question, and Anthony was on the podcast review show forever ago. He does a show about Route 66. He says, here's my question. I'm interested in publishing a book featuring some of the stops along Route 66 that have been featured as episodes, such as diners, businesses, and I either missed the last half of his and historic motels. Okay, do it. It's not that hard. You can have it transcribed, but you're still going to need an editor to edit those out. And it's another stream of income. It may not, books are okay, but the nice thing is it's one of those things, if somebody, wants to take the book with them as they go down Route 66, when my brother, they did a Route 66 tour, and I pointed them to Anthony, and I'm like, oh, here's the podcast you guys want to listen to. And so it's cool, but it's easier to flip through a book to find what you're looking for maybe than going through 17 episodes. And you're like, where's the thing where he talks about the thing? You might be able to find that in the book. But yeah, it's when you self-publish, it's really not as hard as you think. Check out authormedia.com. My buddy Thomas Umstadt Jr., and I just love saying Umstadt because how much more German can you get? That guy, he knows podcasting and he knows books and such. He was actually a book agent for a while. I did not know that. This is a guy that if you sit around, he's just a walking encyclopedia when it comes to author stuff. But it's, and then there are places like Lulu and all sorts of places if you want, the more people
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. It's the thing that got me when I wrote my book, profit from your podcast.
Wait a minute. You wrote a book?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
My favorite.
You almost never talk about that.
Yeah. My favorite thing was I got done writing it and they're like, yeah, we need like another 1,000 or so words. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, I don't have anything else to say. And so if you read the book, and there's a big part where I go into different membership sites saying, this is probably going to be outdated when you read it later, but here's some things to know. And I was kind of like, I don't really want to put this in the book because it's going to be outdated by the time it comes out. And I was right on that. But they needed a couple, we need more words. And I'm like, and it's something to do with literally like how big and how tall the book was. And so if I had self-published that would not be in the book, but I was like, ugh, okay. So that's always fun. But yeah, it's the thing, just like a podcast, right? So you have to figure out like who and what it's for. But then a book, this is going to make it sound easy, and it's not. It just takes discipline. But okay, first of all, in your case, Route 66. Okay, so you say I've got these 5 episodes. Great. Here are the names of the episodes. Those are now chapters. And now in this chapter, we're going to talk about that. So for me, it was, okay, let's talk about monetization. Okay, here are the 7 ways to monetize. Each of those gets a chapter or a sub-chapter or things like that. You just break it into little bitty pieces, and then you're like, okay, I've got my layout. These are my chapters. This is the title. Okay, here's chapter 1. And you start typing. And then about, months later, you're done. And then you want to have an editor, and then you get a second editor because the first editor is going to miss stuff. And then the thing that I kind of go, really, was when I got my book, and, it was the first time I'd worked with a publisher. I was like, I can't wait to see what the front cover is going to be. And so when they sent me a red book with yellow text, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I could have done that in Canva. I was like, really? No, cool money, something, Larry says I had the same issue with my book. Praise to ChatGPT for inspiring me with the additional content needed to publish it. Yeah, I need to buy Larry's book because he said a big chunk of it was based on stuff he fed ChatGPT, and then it wrote it, and then he added personal stories and things like that. So that might be something to do. I logged into ChatGPT last night, and because I asked it, I go, hey, give me the 7 habits of highly effective people, but do not expand on them. Just give me a list. And it was like, and that's why I was like, oh, start with the end in mind was number 2, according to ChatGPT. But I noticed, and this may not be new, but it looked new to me, you can now upload files to it. And
limited. It's limited if you don't have a subscription, just to be clear.
I just need
you get so much. Yeah. You're now, this is at chatgpt.com or OpenAI. If you don't have the plan, they still have a free plan, 3.5.
Right.
Is what they're doing. And that goes forever, but they're teasing you with 4.0. And then it's like, oh, you've used up all your tokens. That's what they call them. You've used up all your tokens, and it takes you back to 3.5. Now, the 4.0 version of it is good. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do, including loading files. Right? You can't do that on 3.5. So it's worth a look. Just know it's limited for now.
The thing I want to do, I've heard people talk about this, is if I can export my stats, which have the title of my episode and the number of downloads, and I want to upload that file and go, based on this, and again, just talk to these things like, based on this table, where the first column is the name of the episode and the second column is the number of downloads, and I might even get, where the higher the number, it's better, come up with 10 additional topics that, based on this table, should be popular or whatever. And I've heard people do that. And I was like, I want to take that one for a test drive, because the one I still love that I just was like, will it do this? Which was like on this show, I'll be like, hey, give me a list of all the companies and their URLs mentioned in this show. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, that shaves some time off of editing. Cause I'm a big fan of, if we mention anything, like in this show, if you go to the show notes when I'm done, we'll have a link to my newsletter. Why? Because we talked about it. We'll have a link to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Why? Because that's on Amazon and that's an affiliate link. So I can do that as well. So it's, always fun. Let's see here. The chat room is saying, got to have, there you go. Larry says the reason it had to be more words, you have to have a spine that will hold the title. He said, I had the same issue with my book. Praise to ChatGPT for inspiring me with additional content needed to do that. I get it. Oh, there you go. And Larry might give me a book. Thank you for that. So, and then DR says ChatGPT 4.0. So, yeah.
4.0.
They just opened up all the functionality on the accounts as well. So you got custom GPTs, DALL-E, data analytics. So they're basically opening up the floodgates, trying to
sort of. Like it's a lot more than it was. It's not everything. You still need to pay if you want everything all the time. It's $20. Like, it's not terrible.
Right. It's funny where things that people will pay for, but they won't pay for this. Jeff said I had it analyze my Facebook stats. It was really impressive. And so there you go. Lane Robinson, most of my episode research starts with write a 30-minute podcast episode script in the voice of Seth Godin on whatever. Don't use it verbatim. And here's something that I was working with Ralph, because Ralph's got a cool show if you're into finance. And his thing that's interesting is he comes up with stuff that is good for personal finance, but also applies to business owners. So, but he used the thing in Descript where, have you seen this yet? The AI can control your eyes. So even if I'm looking over here at my screen, but the thing I noticed, I was watching, there's a channel, I believe it's Think Media. And this guy kind of drives me nuts because he has a Stream Deck in front of him, and all of a sudden he'll go to the side camera. And so now he's talking like this, but you see the different side of his bookcase. And then all of a sudden he'll do this, and then he's talking straight at you. And then after about 5 or 7 sentences, now he's talking to you from this side. And it's different camera angles. I just have the one camera. But I noticed that when you talk to people, a lot of times you might kind of just go, well, you're going to kind of like, you don't always. And I was telling Ralph, I said, I'm not sure if this is weird, if it's just me or what, but the fact that he never looked away. Now, he wasn't like staring at me, in a weird way, but I was like, it was one of those things I'm like, what is going on? And the fact that he never looked away, is that just a Dave thing or is that normal? Because I was like, I need another opinion on this.
Yeah, it's a little creepy, like somebody who doesn't blink. I just keep my eyes nice and squinty so you can't even see where they're looking at. Like, so you have no idea Is he looking at the camera? It's funny. This idea, this love looking at the camera takes a life of its own. There are some folks who are just so dead set on like, you got to be, it's TV, you got to be looking at it. You got, I'm staring at it right now, you got to be looking at it, straight at it, those things. And then there's others that are kind of like, that's kind of creepy if you're just staring at it the whole time. So I always say, go with what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
If you want to be that person who stares at the camera and does it that way, that's fine. There's tools to do that. They're making all kinds of things where you can get it, including teleprompters. I had somebody at work tell me, "Hey, you need to get this teleprompter at work." And I'm like, I'm not gonna. I appreciate it. I always, this freaks people out when I say things like this, but they'll give me advice. You need to. And I'll go, yeah, okay. Yeah. But I'm not going to do it. I just want to be really clear with you. I'm not doing what you told me to do. I don't know if people get that response very much from people. I think a lot of, oh yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for your advice. I learned a long time ago, especially in the world of the open internet, people tell you things, and because they said them to you, they think you're going to do it. Like if you give them the passive aggressive answer, like, oh, I'll consider that. What they hear in their head is, oh, he's going to do that.
It.
That's awesome. Right. And then you don't. And then they start flaming you like, I told Dave months ago he needed to, whatever. And you're like, yeah, you did. But that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Like just because you said it in chat, even multiple times, doesn't mean it's true, it's valuable, or it's what we're going to do. Right. That is kind of back to the conversation before. That's really hard I'm noticing that's really hard for people. I see this all the time. I told him to, you're like, yeah, that's okay. Appreciate the feedback. I'm not going to do so. I've changed my tune with people. And when they give me, they're like, hey, do you think, what would really be great is if you did a show on such and such and such. And I go, oh, I appreciate the feedback. We probably won't do that, just to be really clear. I don't want to mislead you. And they're like, oh, but that keeps it from flying back at me. Now, certainly, if you're going to consider it. But
right.
I think sometimes we got to be honest with folks and just say, Jim, that red does not look good on you today. You should never wear a red shirt. Okay, but I'm gonna again, right. Probably.
Well,
I know it doesn't. It's not. I should be blue. That's my color. But I'm wearing.
It's funny because as I say this, I'm like, oh, you're adding another thing for your show notes here. But Jordan Harbinger did a great episode on people asking for feedback, and he goes 9 times out of 10, what they're really saying is, I want you to agree with everything I've done to this point. He goes, they're not really, which I get that, but it was just, he's like, yeah, that doesn't work. Jody says, I know where the camera is, and I'll look into it for a bit, sure, but I look away to the, out of the frame of my guest on my computer screen. I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, that's the thing. I think if we worry about it, then you end up getting, then it becomes weird. Because then you're like Ralph was perfectly normal. Like he was blinking. He wasn't. It was just like, it was just like,
no, it's fine. So, it's fine. It'll get better. We're saying this in the chat room. This technology will get infinitely better. I'm just afraid I'm going to turn my head and my eyes are going to come out my ears. That's just what I'm worried about.
Yeah. Ralph is saying, so what I'm hearing is lighten up on the eye contact. Well, maybe,
you got to move around a little. I think you got to move around a little bit.
Yeah. And he said, Randy says not blinking is the issue. Well, he is blinking. It was just, like I said, I was wondering sometimes, I listen through the ears of a podcaster and I watch the eye of a content creator and I'm like, what is different? So I was like, is it just me? Am I being too picky here? So
lighten up, Francis.
Yeah.
Too bad that's a really bad spot in the movie. It was a great quote. It's a terrible spot in the movie. That doesn't hold up anymore in 2024.
Oh,
you can't watch that. You can't do that.
My name is Psycho.
Don't do it. No, don't do it. It's a bad spot.
Don't call me Francis. That's too funny. Stripes. If you haven't seen it, classic Bill Murray.
No.
Well, the one thing I thought I would bring up, if I can find it here, is the podcast show in London came up, and James Cridland was talking about it, and you know how much I love Spotify. And this is yet another reason. We should call this the yet another reason why Dave is not a Spotify fan. But here is James talking about the one thing, because they reported like 10,000 people at this thing. And he said, really, there wasn't really anything wrong with it except for this one thing.
You know, the only one negative thing that I would say about the event was Spotify's walled garden. So you walk into the event, and there is this beautiful looking Spotify stand, which is lovely and empty, and it has a barista in there, and it has lots of seating and blah, blah, blah. And you try and go in, and they say, oh no, you're not allowed in. This is for people with meetings only, I'm afraid, which is a really negative thing to have, to actually have as the big booth as you walk into the event, that sort of exclusionary walled garden thing. And I did hear a delicious rumor. And so far as I can work out, there is an element of truth to it. That stand was too big. Spotify ignored the specifications. Spotify ignoring the specifications. Spotify ignored the specifications on the size of that stand, made it too big, with the result that 4 other companies were shunted off somewhere else because Spotify was there. And Spotify had already started building their particular stand. And doesn't that say everything about Spotify?
Yes, it does. So I heard that. My favorite part of that whole thing, a delicious rumor. I'm like,
yeah.
But
James Cridland, who is that? I've never heard
that is James Cridland. Yeah, who?
Oh, okay.
No, Pod News Weekly is. I listen to his daily stuff, and then he and Sam Sethi from True Fans get together for Pod News Weekly, and they kind of go over the top stories and report on stuff. So yeah, everybody, it's funny. Larry's like, was there really 10,000 people? We're all kind of like going, well, it was reported 10,000 people. And I'm like, well, I'm reporting I'm a male model, but that doesn't make it true. So I'm like, come on now.
Don't make fun of my you googly.
Yeah. And so that was the kind of the thing. Jody says, well, isn't that what Spotify is? It's a walled garden, especially now that they no longer use the accepted stats trackers. Yeah. And John is like, look, I just despise Spotify and YouTube. So James is a good guy. If you're not listening to Pod News, he covers the news. Like, I'll put it this way. There were 2 other people doing like podcast news and newsletters, and they're both gone. Like, he just came in, and how he does it, I don't know. But it was, he's all over the globe. Like, he's like, oh, from Kuala Lumpur, and then I'm in New York. And it was funny at the end of that, he said, he was talking about how he got to go to New York City, and he was in more of the financial district versus Midtown. So it wasn't quite so crazy. And he goes, and now I'm in Florida. And he just left it like that. Like, okay, maybe not his favorite place, especially this time of year. It's got to be super muggy down there, but he covers it all. And the thing I like about James Cridland is, for the most part, if he gets something wrong, he will say, okay, I got this wrong. This is what was in the press release. And this is, this is what the truth is. And, so it's not so much that he lied. It's that maybe the press release was not as accurate as it should have been. And if that guy had to fact check every press release, he'd never report on anything. So
yeah, he hustles for sure. Like, people are like, how do you get so successful? Because he kind of came, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but all of a sudden, boom, it was there. And to do what he does at the volume he does in the spaces he does, he's got to be hustling all the time. I think this is one of those I'm sure he's working 7 days a week in most cases, and he's doing things at all hours of the day and night. If you want to be in journalism, that's the life you need to live. You can't take breaks because stuff is happening all the time. And yeah, in the podcast space, maybe it slows down a little bit, but I'm sure he is working hard. To go all the way back to our beginning conversation about creating a business as a coach, I think the number one bit, you got to hustle. And I know people don't like that. They're like, oh, I need a work-life balance. Well, then go work for somebody. If you want balance, go work for somebody. If you want to set your own hours, you're going to set a lot of them. Yeah. You're going to set a lot for yourself. Just get it. Just get that in your mind. Right now, if you're saying right now to yourself, Jim, you're wrong. Good. Prove me wrong. Do it. Like, I don't care. Listen, if you have a successful business on 2 hours a day or 2 hours a week, good for you. The rest of us need to hustle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, DR has a fun point. She goes, Pod News and the feed, they give me street cred. It's so weird where my computer is, because you know what else would give you street cred? Being an awesome supporter. That's right. If you want to be an awesome supporter, you can go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And that, of course, some other things here. You can be an awesome supporter. You can also be a member of the School of Podcasting, where you're going to get access to my step-by-step courses. You get unlimited coaching. I was talking about some coaching clients today. And like I said, I got to do some coaching at Libsyn, which is always fun. And the awesome community. We were talking about that. I will put my community up against anybody's because we've got just a wide variety of people, and they're all awesome. And Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage. If you want to try Podpage, go to trypodpage.com. Or if you want to learn Podpage, go to learnpodpage.com. And both of those use my affiliate link. And right now we're using Ecamm. If you want to check it out, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/Ecamm. And that's Ecamm with 2 M's because it's so good. And I'm going to be and it's all Jeff's fault. Jeff, I spent money because of you. So if this sucks, I'm coming for you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to Ecamm Creator Camp in kind of Boston, but not really. So if you're going there, I will see you there. That's going to be fun. And if you need more Jim Collison, and look, who doesn't need more Jim Collison? Then go over, and it's your pick. You can go to homegadgetgeeks.com, or if you want to be crazy and wild, you can go to theaverageguy.tv, and those both take you to the same place. And it's time for our awesome, fun-filled, as soon as I get it ready, the Wheel O' Names. Here we go. And
do we have them all? Are they all on there?
We have them all. Yes, I double-checked this morning, and I was like, okay. So we'll spin the wheel here, and round it goes. And who will it land on? It is Max Trescott from aviationnewstalk.com. If you are a pilot and you want to stay up on the news, it's I know occasionally you go over there and you'll get the news where unfortunately somebody crashed, and they'll dig into what happened and things of that nature. So Max, thank you so much for your awesome support. I always appreciate that. Really good guy too. And if you find this show that we're saving you time, we're saving you money, maybe we're saving you headaches, maybe we're keeping you educated, maybe we're just making you feel like you're not alone in the world, well, then you might want to consider going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome and being an awesome supporter today. And since, let's go back here, and except that's not where I wanted to go. The next little kind of topic I thought we could talk about is there was not a kerfuffle, but it was an interesting take. I love this guy. This is one of the guys that he's more of a, like he talks about YouTube. He's really popular on YouTube. If you want to learn DaVinci Resolve, this is your guy, Daniel Batal, Batal. And he says, the last thing I want to hear at the end of a video is, thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, which I've been telling people, no, you probably should do that because, Jim, have you ever liked and subscribed to something because somebody said, hey, if you like this video, like and subscribe? Yeah, me too.
I have.
So and so he said, this isn't 2017 and viewers don't need to be reminded that they are watching a video or that the like and subscribe button exists. Take the opportunity to offer something of value, like recommending an additional video you've made that might really serve the needs of that viewer. He says, look, don't get me wrong. Engagement is great, but additional video views and longer watch time sessions will help grow your channel faster than clicking a like and subscribe button. He says, new viewers who watch and enjoy multiple pieces of your content in a single session are far more likely to subscribe and engage. They're also likely to be served more of your content in the future. Don't waste your ask. And I was like, interesting. So
it's a little strong, I think, a little strong. However, there is a little bit of evidence that YouTube is downplaying the subscribe and not, even though you're subscribed to them, well, they get those different levels of subscribing, right? You can get all notifications or just important ones, whatever that means, right? Or on the bell, right? Smash the bell, as folks used to say. There is some evidence that it used to be when you were subscribed, those on the top row would always show up. There were new ones. They'd always show up on the top row of your search. That may not be true anymore. And so there may be some validity to this, that the subscribe may not be as important. That used to be everything.
Yeah.
Subscribe was everything on YouTube. There's some evidence that's that may be getting downplayed, because the search page on YouTube is the most important thing. Almost everyone goes there to get to especially when they're just surfing for stuff, right? So it may not be as important. I don't agree with the ask. Don't waste your ask. I think you can blend that in to the video itself at some point in time. And so, like, if you're currently watching us on YouTube right now, why don't you like and subscribe? Why wouldn't you just do that for me?
Please. And smash the bell, because it's a bell and all. Yeah. So I went back and I went down. This was on Twitter, I believe, is where this came from. And he says, it's not that I'm against people choosing whatever call to action makes sense for their own goals. He goes, I just hate seeing struggling creators thinking the path to success is constantly asking people to like and subscribe. He goes, that rarely works if the content and channel aren't already providing massive value. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, that's a different story. That's what I believe creators should be focused on. And I said, yeah, so many people focus on marketing and promotion when they forget to not just make something good, but something wow, which is coming out in 2 weeks on the School of Podcasting. I'm doing an episode about wow content. With that said, I have subscribed because someone reminded me to, but it was because I got value. So I think that's really, like
I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it's bad.
And if
I think you need to ask.
Yeah. And if it's live and you don't know what video to suggest, like, oh, hey, since we talked about this today, watch this video. I've seen people do that where they're like, watch this video here, and then nothing pops up on the screen. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Somebody dropped the ball there.
Well, look at Jeff. I mean, Jeff dropped a super chat in, and
he
said,
dropped
like
a super chat
to the show. Yeah, look at that. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for supporting Dave in that way, and appreciate that. Dave's looking for some cheering music.
I am.
Right
I'm like,
now.
Where's my David Lee Roth, man? I got Craig. I got what? Nope, nothing. Oh, here we go. Whoa! Thank you very much. We need that.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Oh, look at that.
That's it.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and speaking of that, you can down by Jim there it is, a little like, subscribe and ring the bell.
It's like we planned this whole segment just so people would subscribe. Do you, as a content creator, by the way, there's some backlash against that term now, content creator. Really? What's wrong with that? Yeah. Well, I saw something somewhere. Stop saying you're a content creator. Like, I don't know. It's like anything. Do you, for your subscribes, for your like and subscribes, how often do you go in and check them on YouTube? Is that something you... I don't. In fact, I need to get, like, the only thing I do consistently on my YouTube channel is this. In fact, that's one of the things I want to do this weekend is get like, it's that first step back on the treadmill. Cause I used to do just a little short YouTube thing about once a week, and then more like 3 times a month. Like, I'd probably skip one. And I'm like, I don't know what happened that I'm not doing YouTube anymore, but I need to do YouTube. And not because I have to, because it's so cool and everybody's doing it. I was just like, no, I got a couple ideas, and I don't know why. I just kind of, was like, but yeah. So because that's my whole thing. Well, people, if I want to get on my YouTube's not a podcast, soapbox, I'm like, look, in the end, I always go, we're all just content creators. So if we're not content creators, what are we? That's, that's a nice broad brush. If you're a blogger, you're a content creator. If you're a audio podcast, you're a content creator. If you're I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just saying I saw a little backlash to it. That's always, well, I know. I'm not giving it backlash. I saw some backlash. I always thought it was funny that people would get upset about the word pod fade. And I never, ever heard anybody go, oh, you're just a dirty little pod fader. Like, I've never heard it. It was always like, well, and they pod faded. And it was like, it's not like, that's Seinfeld.
that guy. Well, he did 9 seasons and then he pod faded. I'm like, but people for a while like, how dare you say pod fade? You're kicking people out of the space because you're shaming them. I said, no, they pod faded. They quit. Like, nothing wrong with. Maybe I should have said they pod retired, pod tired. No, well, we're all pod tired. I mean, look at us. We got bags on our eyes.
Do we have to put pod in front of it?
No, please don't.
Have the word pod?
Yeah.
Does it have to? The Rich Hay, who I interviewed this week for Home Gadget Geeks, he had been a longtime podcaster and blogger, and then took a job at Microsoft as a community manager for their feedback team.
Ah, nice.
And I think they said, no, stop. You have to stop. If you're going to do this, you can't do any of your own stuff.
Ooh.
And he just did. He did. He stopped, and he's now retiring. And he says, I'm bringing it back. And so good on him, right, for going with what was available. I mean, in the role, they were just like, yeah, no. And to be honest with you, I don't know if they said he needed to stop or he thought, I'm going to be so busy, I'm not going to have the time to do this, to commit to this. Because, listen, community management is a full-time. And when I say full-time, I mean all the time job. Yeah. That's what I do. I'm on all the time. As this conference is going on, I'm getting pinged behind the scenes on Facebook and LinkedIn. We're in Omaha. Folks are landing right now. My listeners, my community is landing right now. And so and you can divide and conquer and all those other things that you guys want to do to make it work, but it's a full-time job. So Dave, I'm not trying to throw Microsoft or Rich under the bus at all on this. And let's just say this, he chose to stop blogging and stop podcasting. As he's retiring this summer, he said, you know what, I'm bringing it back. And I really appreciate that. It doesn't have to go forever. It can start and stop. You can do it. You can do it once a quarter, do it when you feel like it. I mean, it can just be something you do. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to it's hard enough as it is. Don't feel bad when you're doing what works for you. Right. And certainly don't bow to the crowd I haven't seen an episode in 45 days. Where have you been? Yeah. Well, you get it for free. Just relax. Yeah. Friends. Well, just relax.
SB says conflict of interest and brand security are real. So that would be weird if somebody hired me and said, you can do this, but you can't podcast anymore. That would be weird. You'd have to pay me a lot of money to shut me up completely.
Well, his podcast was about Windows. It's one of the reasons he it's called Windows Observer. And it was one of the reasons he got hired for the job is because he knew so much about the community and
that is a short-sighted company. So you've got an influencer.
No, hold on. I want to go on record again as saying I don't know if Microsoft asked him not to, and I don't know if it was his decision.
Got it.
I may have said they did, and if I did, I could be wrong. And so let me just retract. I'll do a James Cridlin, whoever that guy is, retraction on this and say, I'm not sure who did that. I assume maybe I could go back and look at my transcripts and see what was said. The point of that whole thing is not that. The point was he decided to take a break. He took a break for 2 years, 2.5 years. Then he came back. Yeah. And you can do that. That was the point. Sorry to go down that path.
John says I brought a podcast back after 4 years. It's my favorite. Yeah. We do it once a month for fun. There you go.
Why not?
Yeah. Lane says if you missed a week, I listen to so many podcasts, I probably wouldn't notice until I actually thought about it. You guys want to hear something? I'm going to cheat. Last night it was beautiful out, and I'd had a hard week. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to the park. I'm going to go play in nature, maybe have a deer come up and try to kick me, something fun, right? And so instead of recording your podcast website, I will do that today. But here's the fun part. I'm going to say that it came out yesterday. That's right. I'm going to lie. So
why do you need to? Why do you need to?
It's a Sheldon kind of thing. I want to show that it comes out every 2 weeks on Friday. So yes, I'm a big fat liar because it didn't come out.
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a lie. I'm just kind of wondering what's the motivate. Listen, I like a complete list. I like things, I like if it's going to come out on Monday, I love that thing to say Monday. I love that.
Yeah.
So I would set it just so it looked good, right? It looked good in the feed or whatever you're doing there. No, I'm just wondering what the motivation was. I don't think it's wrong. I'm just wondering what, why. Why are you compelled?
It's a very Sheldon thing. It's just like, it's supposed to come out on Fridays. And I guess because in this instance, like I have some shows that are test shows, and that show is kind of a test show. I'm having fun with it. But I'm like, well, for now, I kind of wanted to at least appear that it's consistent, even if I'm 24 hours late. Because I woke up this morning to billions of emails going, hey, man, where's your podcast? What? No, I did not. So I haven't
seen it. Are you okay?
Yeah. Something else just to throw it up here, just a way of saying thank you, Jeff, for making it rain here. If you go over to socialmedianewslive.com, that is where I cannot make it rain. Yes, I can make it rain if I'm sharing the screen there. So think of that. Yeah, it's a fun show. In fact,
it is a fun show. It is a fun show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff is really good at reusing content. Like I think I saw yesterday a reused clip of when I was on there. He pulled out a little statement. We were talking about being nervous and how I like to think that you can harness. That's the word I want. You can harness nervous energy for better performance, right? I think it's a good thing to be nervous on some of these things. Anyways, he took that little clip and reshared it. He said to me several times, he goes, I really like to, continue to use bits and pieces. He's probably a good example if you want to see how other people are not just doing a one and done, but are continuing to use clips and bits and some of those other things throughout. Jeff's probably doing it as good as anybody.
Absolutely. And I finally went through his course. He has a Descript 101. And it's interesting because I had done a thing where I know this Descript is the tool where it transcribes it, you edit the transcription, and it edits the audio. And I know you can copy it and paste it into a new composition, and which I did. And then I couldn't find the new composition. And I'm watching Jeff's thing, and all of a sudden I see at the top where he's like, oh, you can just switch to the composition up there. And I'm like, there you go. That was worth the money right there. He solved my one problem. I was like, that's it. So Jody says she stopped her first show because it wasn't what I really wanted to be doing. But it sure taught me a lot about how to do a podcast, and I've used those lessons. I know a lot of people that it was Grammar Girl is probably my favorite one. Grammar Girl was Mignon Fogarty's second podcast, the one that got her on Oprah. But her first show was super labor intensive. It wasn't really her passion. It was kind of something related to her job. And she's like, yeah, no, thank you. And speaking of changing, this is now available. I've got my first that's a trailer. It's a really long trailer, but what was formerly Podcast Rodeo Show. So I'm going to put out an episode. I have a lot of episodes to do this week, but I'm going to put one out on Podcast Rodeo Show saying, unless you pay me, I'm not doing the show anymore, basically, because that's just a show. And I was like, I had fun. I did 500 episodes, but we're not doing this for free anymore. And the Podcast Rodeo Show was $5. And I might do that with that. Like, if you just want the quick 10-minute episode, all right, that's fine. But if you want to really
500,
I did 500 episodes. When that show first came out, I was doing, I think, 3 a week. And,
wow.
Because it's quick. It's like an hour to do that show. And I was just like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And then the fact that it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, which was drive traffic to the School of Podcasting. So Podcast Hot Seat, here's what Podcast Hot Seat is, really, in a nutshell. It's you get a month of the School of Podcasting. Oh, and I'll review your show and website for free, because it's basically the price of a month at the School of Podcasting. And then once you sign up, there may be a coupon to have you stick around, but we'll see how it works. But that's another fun-filled piece of artwork by the one and only Mark over at podcastbranding.co. And what's kind of cool, I'm going to ask Mark, and if he wants me to pay him for that, I wouldn't mind it, but I want a version of that logo. So the logo is a blue chair with a blue Yeti on fire, and then it says Podcast Hot Seat above it. I'm going to see if he can give me a copy without Podcast Hot Seat, and then I'll have just that big blank space at the top where I can make episodic artwork with that.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, that might be cool. Or maybe maybe I'll have the burn. I don't know. I'll have to talk to him about it, but I need to talk to him anyway because I want him to come on Your Podcast website show. And then
just don't sit on that seat. That would be
be bad.
A burning blue Yeti. Yeah.
So SP says, are you going to redo episode 0? Yeah, I'm treating this like a whole new show. And I need to put out an episode on the Podcast Rodeo show that says, hey, the website's not going down. The content's going to be here, but I'm going to redirect. Like when you wake up tomorrow, Podcast Rodeo show is going to look like Podcast Hot Seat. And there's one episode in it right now. So if you want to listen to this stuff, you have to go to the website. And I'm going to leave that there for a month. And then I will turn off the redirect. So if people want to listen to the old episodes, they can do it in their phone. So it's a lot of Dave playing with stuff in this little move. It's like, because somebody said, well, what if nobody signs up? Maybe nobody pays for a hot seat. I'm like, then, the Podcast Rodeo show was going to go away one way or another. And I was like, it was going to be either pay me to do it or not, and maybe they'll both be this way. But it was just like, just not getting what I want out of it. And people change, life change, changes, different things like that. So, and Coach Save says, as a former firefighter, that cover art with the flaming microphone on the couch says hydrogen. Wow, cyanide gas to me. Yep, those foam seats are really bad when they burn. Well, I'll have to keep that in mind. John says, if you quit the Podcast Rodeo show, I was going to start Podcast Crimes. That'd be good. In fact, I might put out an episode because I realized I told everybody going, hey, Podcast Hot Seat will be available June 1st. Well, that's today. And it is. You can hear my episode where I explain how Kim Newlove from the Podcaster's Voice podcast let me know that I had done some changing of the description for the School of Podcasting, and I had a typo in the title of my show. And she was lucky enough she was nice enough to say, hey, Dave, do you know you misspelled monetize? And I'm like, no. And I look over, plan, launch, monetize. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And then Rich Graham let me know that in Your Podcast website, like the third time I referred to, there's a guy that was talking about designing websites. And the third time I mentioned his website, I said it wrong. So it's my whole point is like, hey, sometimes you need a second set of eyes to look at this stuff. And, we catch stuff. I see things all the time that I'm like, like the guy we're talking about at the beginning of the show, all he had was a landing page. And I go, that's great if you're just selling one product. But now you're going to be doing a podcast. You need a way to contact you. There's a lot of really low-hanging fruit that sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and you end up doing stuff. So, yes, is the Podcast Hot Seat going to be value for value? Yes, and that's something I'll be interesting to see because, and it's funny because Adam Curry called this. There's a tool called Alby, A-L-B-Y. It's at getalby.com. And that was the easy way to go and get a wallet. And then it was, everybody can send stuff there. And it was all went through Alby. Well, the whole point of Podcasting 2.0 is to decentralize it. And right in the middle of this whole thing, we centralized our payment system through this website who just went, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. I haven't read any. They're kind of bad about communicating this, but I heard on the Podcasting 2.0 show that they're getting out of that business because here's a novel idea. Guess how much they charge for that, Jim? 0. Yes. And the last time I checked, free is not a good business model. And I'm like, guys, shouldn't you be taking a cut of some of the money that's going in and out? And why they didn't, I don't know. I would have given them a, 5% split or something. But so I am speaking uninformed. I've only heard this, haven't saw anything official yet. But that, for the record, that does not mean Podcasting 2.0 is dead. In fact, the last episode, they're like, well, we're going to take this now and build something that we should have back then that's decentralized and makes it easy to get a wallet and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, the Alby is very bad at communication. They for a while, you had to be on a wait list, and they didn't let anybody know. And I'm saying, go over and sign up. And people are like, yeah, I'm on a wait list. I'm like, what? So, That's it. And Randy says, I can become the Simon Cowell of podcast reviewers. I was for a while. If you listen to the early versions of the Podcast Rodeo Show, it was literally off the top of my head, going to say it, not going to think about it. And then I had one person that basically said, you hurt me. And I was like, all right, we need to soften this up a little bit. That's not, and I didn't think it was in line with the fun, happy, helpful podcast coach just smashed my ego and told me I was a turd that couldn't be polished. I'm like, that's not good. So I had to soften it up a little bit. So that's sounds like a great name for a band.
The turd that can't be polished.
The unpolishable turd. So
there you go.
Gotta get that on a t-shirt.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
it was a little brand confusion. We talked about that.
Yeah.
I've said that to you before.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing. So, and then Chris says, what are we going to do with our 4,354,234 Satoshis, which is like, whatever, $1.10, something like that. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, but there is some,
we'll move them. You should be able to move them. If it's a true crypto wallet.
Yeah.
You should be able to move those Satoshis to another crypto wallet.
Yeah.
Right. Send them.
But meanwhile,
I'm not a fan of this. I say this this is starting to rear its ugly head now. And you're like, yeah, maybe Bitcoin wasn't the best, or crypto.
Yeah.
I get it. But you're going to have problems like this because the technology is still so new.
Well, the fun thing was, again, James Cridlin, James Cridlin, Pod News Weekly, the same one where he talked about Spotify. They interviewed the head of Pocket Cast, which in the worlds of independent apps, it's been around forever. It's owned by WordPress, and they adapted chapters and transcripts to that. And there's this cool feature called Podroll. And if you were around for MySpace, where you could recommend, your 8 friends. Well, now you can recommend as many people as you want. And what I love about that feature, once it gets implemented by enough people, is they'll be able to make charts. Like, here are the top 10 most recommended podcasts. Now, I also know that it'll take about, if we start now and done, okay, that's how long it's going to take for people to sell those spots. Because, marketers will come in and like, hey, you can be in my top 8. It's only $50 a month. So that'll be fun. But when more people, like I know Buzzsprout right now has that in it. So when more media hosts start to do that, then more apps will start to show this whole Podroll thing. And that's going to be maybe the discoverability problem will be partly solved. So I'll be interested to see that. And if your media host doesn't do anything with Podcasting 2.0, it's usually support at whoever your media host is and say, hey, why aren't you supporting 2.0? Because if you don't complain about it, they're not going to do it. Which is why I'm now telling people all the time, go bug your media host. Don't flame out on Twitter, email their support from you, showing you that whole 9 yards. Coach Dave said, I still like my Thrive Cart solution for donations. Yep. I embed a simple cart with choose your own amount option, and they pay via credit and pay the credit card fee. That's pretty cool. I have Thrive Cart. I'm using it for Podcast Hot Seat. Coach Dave says, crypto was doomed. We're doomed. Power players that have the monopoly and will make rules will always find a way to absorb it, like the Borg. I don't know what a Borg is. My whole thing is, as much as crypto can get, I'm waiting for, I've heard rumors it's going to be called the Eagle, but eventually the U.S. is going to come up with some sort of digital coin, is what I hear. I don't know if it's true or not, but if they do, whatever is the hot crypto thing of the day is maybe going to get squashed like a bug. We'll see. It's the whole thing. We could get into a whole crypto conversation, but money is only valuable because we say it's valuable. And so that's the
faith.
Yeah. So
faith and credit. Faith and credit are two words that have never been more true than they are right now when you think about currency. When you think especially US currency. Yeah. So, you faith and credit. Full, they say, the full faith and credit.
Jody's using Buy Me a Coffee. I need to dig into that system. I use it, on occasion if somebody's like, hey, can I give you some money? I'm like, here. What I don't get is how they make money. Like, when I look at it, I don't see where they're taking any fees. There's no monthly fee. And I'm like, wait, how? What? So that's always kind of a head scratcher with that one, but I'll take it. And then Dan says, isn't basically money basically a digital coin now? Yeah, I haven't touched like cash in a very long time. If I go to Luigi's Pizza, they now have a thing because they don't take credit cards. And I'm like, what? But you have to go in the back. They have this little machine, and you get a receipt that you've taken out money, and you give them the receipt. It's a weird, wonky way to get that done. But
well, the difference though, crypto is trackable.
Yeah,
and U.S. currency is not. I mean, basically, and then there's a limit on crypto, and there's no such thing as a limit to U.S. currency. I mean, they just keep selling more bonds and then issue more money.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's from our standpoint. Yes, it's digital because our banking is all digital now, and nobody using a credit card to swipe it, and some of those other kinds of things. So from that standpoint, yes, digital. Dan, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
On that, but there is a big difference between the way currencies work and the way crypto works.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there.
Yeah. Here's speaking of Mark, we mentioned him earlier. This is congressionaldish.com, the lovely and talented Jen Briney. If you're an American, you should be listening to the show. It's just her last couple episodes have been just crazy. And I point this out because she has a support page. And if I remember, if you go down here, you can send a check or money order. You can do PayPal. You can join her Patreon.
What?
Yeah. You can use Zelle. Yeah, exactly. I used to send her a check. I had my bank would send a check because there's no fees for that. So, but I've never heard of Pop Money. I've heard of Venmo, Cash App. You can give her Bitcoin. You can send her Ethereum. You can make a Litecoin donation, or you can buy a merch. And I have a shirt of hers. I really, it's a great show. And again, the website by the one and only Mark over at Podcast Branding. But so that's what she does. She basically has it all there. So it's, you could do Venmo. You just got to have stuff like that. I'm not sure because Venmo, don't you have to send it to their phone number? That would be a little
U.S. only. No, you find them. You can find them in the app, and then you verify it with a phone number. You can find them with a phone number. You could give somebody your phone number, and they find you. But you have a username in Venmo, and you can set up Venmo, but it's U.S. only. They're talking a little bit about that in chat. It is U.S. only, and they're talking about doing fees too. Like that. This is the fee. This we always start free. I got a notice from Otter that they're going to change their pricing structure. They'd already done it once, and they're getting ready to do another round. And I think it's going to force me to go pro. And I think I'm going to go from $10 to
a lot.
Whatever. Now that StreamYard is owned by Bending Spoons or whatever it is, you got to kind of wonder. I'm on a $10 for life. I know it's not really for life, right? Whatever. At some point, I think that's unsustainable. They're going to start looking at those plans.
Rob Greenlee on the New Media Show said that there's a lot of people because they were owned by Hopin, I think it was, and either Hopin employees or StreamYard people. A lot of them are gone. In fact, he said the founders, when the two guys that started StreamYard, when they found it was up for sale, they tried to buy it back. And they just couldn't do it. And so now some Bending Spoons thing, and it's which is a company that they buy a lot of apps and such. So it's not, it's not a horrible thing, but we're all kind of they're not really known for really taking things to the next level. So,
well, the business model there is buy the app and then jack up the prices. That's their business model. So, it's going to be, we've seen this, this has happened before. LogMeIn was one of those that had this and then all of a sudden, it's like, hey, you're now $39.99 a month. You were paying $5, so
yeah,
I would, if you're a StreamYard user, I would keep your eyes and ears open for that kind of communication. And Otter just contacted me yesterday. I need to read through that email, and
that's me.
It was, hey, we put you in a group for a year. That basically, we grandfathered you in for a year. that year is up in July.
Yeah, because
so it's like,
I forget what it used to be, but it was considerably more. Now, to their credit, they've added a lot of really cool functionality. It used to be just a transcription service, but yeah, that was one of the people that said you need to update your credit card. And I'm like, do I want to do this? Because that means, and I need to figure out when they're going to charge me, because that will be one I'll have to think about. I use Otter because I have a great deal on it and stuff like that, but I'm like, Yeah. Jeff C says, when Bending Spoons bought Evernote, which, again, what did they do? They jacked up the price. That's why I went to NoteJoy, and Jeff went to Notion. So, yeah. Let's see. Login and Bo? Let's see. Basically,
LastPass.
They bought LastPass.
Yeah.
And then sold it.
And bought LastPass.
And another one did the same.
Oh, LastPass has been a mess.
Yeah. That's why I'm on one. A mess. I love 1Password. So... But, man, that went quick. Jim, what is coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Rich Hay, I mentioned a little bit earlier. Rich Hay is on, and we catch up with Rich a little bit. We looked at this new line of digital telescopes that you do some amazing things all from the comfort of your home. You set this up, log into the app on your phone, it connects via Wi-Fi, and they do some amazing things. I had no idea. I like to look at the stars, but I don't like it when it's cold outside.
Yeah.
You can all do this from the comfort of your home. So it's available right now. Check it out, homegadgetgeeks.com.
And on this week, I'm interviewing Matt Kundle, who does the Sound Off podcast. He just went over 400 episodes, and when I was on his show, I'm like, any lessons from those 400? He goes, oh, absolutely. And so that's coming up. And then the week after that, I'm doing an episode about really what makes good content, what does Google think is good content, and then I just got a bunch of different opinions from different people on what they feel is good content. So that's what's coming on the School of Podcasting.com. Thanks to the chat room. Thanks to Dan from Based on a True Story Podcast.com and Mark over at podcastbranding.co. And of course, this show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting.com. Use the coupon code COACH when you sign up for either a monthly or yearly subscription, or if you want to be an awesome supporter. That's like, 15 calls to action I've done now? So, yeah. Oh, I was thanking people. Yeah. Those were calls to action.
Just do one of them. Can we say? Just do one of them.
Are we going to be rebels and say like, subscribe, and ring the bell?
For sure. Yeah. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
I was waiting
for subscribe.
I was waiting for the flames of hell to shoot up behind you. But we'll see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.